like $300 million. $225 million of revenue bonds, 50 in GO bonds. We've already spent 12. You've got at least 20. And the land incentive, that is large enough that it should require the public involvement, as just happened in Miami. So again, anything that you're doing that you're going, well, we, fear the people, don't do that.
So we have a number of people in the queue. Is this on the substitute? We need to vote on the substitute before we actually debate the bill as substituted. Are any of the people who are in the queue debating the merits of the substitute? Or shall we go ahead and vote on the substitute? I believe Mr. Jameson, can you state the difference between...
By a show of hands, if no one wants to speak on the substitute, you could vote on the substitute and move on.
And then we'll move on. That's correct. Okay, I believe the substitute is a fairly technical change. So if no one raises your hand that you want to speak on the substitute specifically, we'll vote on the substitute and then move to our discussion. Okay, we are voting on the substitute. All those in favor of the substitute?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
To the substitute. It was clear to me. Okay, the substitute passes. We are now having debate on the bill as substituted. So, Councilmember Glover.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I find it somewhat fascinating. We had a letter tonight telling us that we're elected to do these things. Well, back in 2011, the people said that they wanted to go determine what the fairgrounds was supposed to be and what they wanted to see happen with it. So they were very clear, not by 51 or 52%, over 70% said that don't mess with the fairgrounds. Well, that's not good enough for us because, gosh, we just have to keep picking at things in here. And so when we aren't able to give the cost of living adjustments last year in the budget, when we certainly will face the same dilemma and even greater in the upcoming budget, then all of a sudden we seem to be flush with money in order to do these deals. But we all know we're not. So at the end of the day, I think, Mr. Jameson, at the end of the 2011, it said 27 votes or by referendum, doesn't it? It gives that option.
Charter amendment.
Charter amendment, yeah. So here's the bottom line. We don't hurt ourselves by voting this and supporting it because we're going to let the public have their say. And if the public decides that they want to change their minds, then we'll honor that. I can happily honor that because the voters have told us what they want. Not a few of us in here telling them what they're going to have and what they're going to get. And so therefore, you don't make a mistake by supporting this. All you're doing is honoring what they asked us to do back in 2011. Leave it alone unless they want to change it. So with that, I'll be supporting this resolution. Again, there's not a downside here. We're letting the voters decide what they want. And if they tell us that they want to do away with fairgrounds as it exists today, then we'll honor it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a couple questions. One is probably for Mr. Jameson. The other is likely for the sponsor here. All right, so if this were to result in a successful referendum and then were disapproved, I'm a little confused about how all the moving parts interrelate, right? This is my reading of the substitute is that we would put to the voters just the $50 million in general obligation bonds. And so with this body having already approved revenue bonds, and then if, again, depending on how various votes we take tonight go, how do all those things add up if and when the referendum is put to the voters, actually I guess whether passage or defeat at the ballot box occurs. And then for the sponsor, I guess maybe that's my question here is, I hear the let the public weigh in piece, but again, if I'm looking somewhat at this, I'm curious about where our threshold is, right? We don't know yet at this moment in the meeting whether or not a 27 vote threshold will be upheld for demolition of any properties at the fairgrounds. We also, if we establish a new threshold at $50 million as our kind of benchmark for how much of Metro's bonding capacity is put to voters, I'm trying to get a sense of where this fits in the scheme of things from scope and propriety of when we take specific projects to the voters, and I'd love to hear the sponsor speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in terms of the practical effect of passage and how it works with the other legislation in front of you, you have the resolution for the GO bonds. By state law, those are the items that are subject to a referendum because they are payable by the ad valorem taxes, the property taxes, essentially. You have the GO bond that we've deferred a little bit further down the agenda, 1328. Should the current referendum resolution pass, that becomes the GO bond language. It supplants 1328, it replaces it. You still have three other ordinances, essentially the rezoning, the demolition and ticket tax, and the declaration of surplus and lease approval. Those are not trumped by this resolution by law, but you would still, as a practical matter, have three ordinances that could proceed despite a referendum that's coming up in November. So although they're not immediately deleted or deferred by law, any action on them that's taken by the team would be at the team's risk, and they would be ill-advised to proceed until after November 6th. If November 6th the referendum comes and is adopted, that is binding on all of the ordinances passed by this council or not.
And the same for the revenue bonds, effectively?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Madam President. So I think we should continue to have a robust discussion on this, but I would think that we'd want to do it kind of within the context of the other bills, which is why I rolled the resolution, the bond resolution, to with the other package. So with all due respect, I'm going to make a motion to roll this resolution behind RS 2018-1328.
That will require suspension of Rule 1.
Well, I would request to suspend Rule 1
Right.
to move Resolution 2018-1373 behind 2018-1328.
Is there an objection? See one. I see several. There's an objection.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and speak to the content of the resolution. So there is an issue with doing this. The $50 million that's proposed in the GO bond that we're going to take up later, the resolution, $25 million of that goes toward stadium infrastructure improvement, and $25 million of that goes to fairgrounds infrastructure and building improvements. Improvements we're talking about, including what we were just talking about with new expo and flea market facilities. If this is to be delayed, put on a referendum for something that I'll get to is highly unusual, all of a sudden we're pushing back the whole schedule of things that we've already been saying that we're going to do when it comes to these new facilities. And we have amendments, we have resolutions, and we have bills regarding the scheduling of all that to try and make sure we're respecting all the existing uses. Voting for a resolution that would delay the funding for improvements of the fairgrounds is fundamentally a bill that is against the fairgrounds, because you're voting to delay much needed infrastructure and building funding. So putting that aside, put fairgrounds aside, I think there's a very obvious reason why this GO bond issue is going, is proposed to go to a referendum, while the GO bond issues that we've done for the last decade through capital spending plans, including $18 million that has gone toward this property for improvements that nobody even thought to put those toward referendum. Hundreds, if not $1 billion in GO bonds that have been issued over the last decade haven't been put to voters because, well, we felt that that was our responsibility. We felt that we were the ones who were supposed to be working on capital spending plans and capital improvement budgets. And this one gets singled out. Well, why do you think it gets singled out? I would ask that council members consider if voters went to a referendum that talked to them about GO bonds, and the sponsor himself has mentioned that it's not exactly the clearest language in the world, that they're going to think that they're voting on an entire project. They're going to think that they are voting on everything that we're going to be discussing here tonight, when it's simply not true. They'll be voting on the issuance of municipal bonds about portions of project that may or may not go forward based on, regardless of their vote. So in my mind, I think that this is an issue that we need to be taking up here. It is absolutely tied to everything else that we're going to be discussing tonight. And I think it's more appropriate that we have that discussion here instead of sending out a very unclear message and an unclear ballot resolution that won't do what it's going to purport to do. I would ask that you disapprove this resolution.
Thank you. Councilmember Hagar.
I rise in support of this referendum. I'll tell you why. We just went through this a year or two ago over the Fort Nigley, that's a historical area, and we wanted to put a private development on that. And that was voted down eventually by this council. The fairgrounds is a historical area also, in my opinion. It's been there for over 100 years. I've been going to it ever since I was small. And when we had the Titan Stadium come here, we voted on, put it on the referendum for the voters to decide whether we would have a Titans football stadium here. That voted, as I recall, was about 60–65% in favor of the Titans Stadium. What is the difference in putting this on a referendum and letting the voters vote for it? It's their property, it's their land, it's their tax money. Let them vote for it. I don't understand why this group can't allow this referendum to go through and let the voters have a say in this development. Thank you.
Councilmember Foley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I rise not in support of this referendum. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case, but we are elected to make these decisions. I agree with Councilman Sledge. You know, we've had millions of dollars of GO bonds that come before us, and we have yet to put one of them on a referendum. We can't even really, if you look back at the 2011 referendum, we can't even decide at this body what it even says. I'll read to you what was on the ballot that I voted for in 2011. It says, "It shall be the duty of the Board of Fair Commissioners to continue to conduct all activities being conducted on the premises of the Tennessee State Fairgrounds as of December 31st, 2010. This shall include, but is not limited to, the State Fair and all these other things that we're talking about." So it doesn't limit what you can do there, but I can't begin to tell you how many people have told me that it does limit that. Nothing else can go there. So I don't even know that we know what was on the 2011 ballot, and then we're going to go put this to a referendum as well. It's $50 million in GO bonds, but it all ties together. It's a very important part of the whole piece and the whole package. And we've spent months studying this. And if it goes to a referendum, it's going to be a campaign of sound bites. And that's what's going to rule the day. Constituents cannot be expected to study this at the level that we as council members are expected to dive into this. They cannot be expected to do that. I've had my constituents come to me and tell me the very same thing. So I do not support this being put to a referendum, and I will not be voting for this.
Thank you. Councilmember Pardue.
Don't panic, it's not going to take long. And I wish I had the speaking class that most of these folks in here have got. I don't have it, so you're going to have to put up with what I got to say. I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning thinking about this, and my daddy come to mind. He was a poor, uneducated, good, honest man. And he used to tell the family, if you got cheated out of something, or if you got duped on a deal, he would say, well, bless his heart. Well, if this passes tonight, what we're telling the people of Nashville is bless your damn heart, because you've been duped.
Councilmember Henderson. I'd like to remind people this is not a public hearing. This is council debate, and we ask you to remain silent in the chamber. Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I rise in support of this resolution. I understand the distinction that Councilman Sledge is trying to make as it relates specifically to the language being about the GO bonds, the $50 million for the fairgrounds improvements and all the ancillary stuff related to it. It is inextricably linked to the broader project, and as such, it will be a referendum on the project. So why are we afraid to let the people decide about this? And as it relates to the timing and the sequencing of the project, November 6th is in 8 weeks. So I'm just not sure why that is such a huge delay in the scheme of things. And I think what it speaks to is the assumption that this is a foregone conclusion and the fix is in and it's already been done. So I would reiterate what Councilman Cooper said. You know, unlike some of my colleagues, I do think, frankly, that MLS could potentially work at the fairground site. Not with those 10 acres. And I appreciate the information that we have received and all the due diligence that we all have done. But I still arrive at a place where, regrettably, it's not a project that I could support. And thus, I think it would be helpful to us all and to the community to know what our citizens think about this. So I would encourage you all, even if you do support this project, that, you know, what is the harm in letting the people vote on it? Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Elrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's been said of why don't we put this on the ballot and let folks vote on giving away land, let them vote on the soccer stadium, but legally. And I think it's important whether we believe it represents something or not. Legally, it represents just the $50 million on GO bonds for improvements for the fairgrounds, not the soccer stadium specifically, but for the entire campus. And so to go to the ballot and vote against this, you would literally, legally be voting against $50 million in improvements against the fairgrounds. Where people that are opposed to the stadium will be saying that you're voting against the stadium, you're actually voting against legally improvements for the fairgrounds. I think that's important. Because whatever we want to put representations on what this referendum would mean or not mean, what it actually means, I think, is the most important part in trying to be honest and transparent to our constituents and to the city. Additionally, the charter, as Councilman Pulley was stating, while there is difference of opinion of what people believe it says or doesn't say, no matter what the referendum says or what people want to represent of what it says about the soccer stadium, even if the referendum were to pass, the council eventually would have the ultimate say of whether to build the soccer stadium where it's proposed, no matter what the referendum says, because of the 27 vote threshold. And I think that's important because there's a realistic scenario where the referendum could pass, say 51 to 49 or 60 to 40 or whatever number you want to come up with, but it still needs to get 27 votes in the council. And so we could literally theoretically pass something on a referendum that is represented as approving the soccer stadium, but yet we could vote against it at this council. So I think the referendum speaks clearly that the council has the final say, and that's what the charter amendment, I believe, says. If we could put the entire project on the ballot, I could possibly be for that, but that's not what this does legally. And I think it's important for folks to know that. This is not voting on the soccer stadium. This is only putting on the ballot $50 million in soccer improvements, or excuse me, did it myself even. Putting $50 million in improvements for the fairgrounds. That's what, and I want to put $50 million of improvements in the fairgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Haywood.
I just want to stand in favor of the intellect of our constituents. I don't think we should discount how intellectual our constituents are. And I just had to stand and say that.
Thank you. Councilmember Bennett.
Thank you. I really question the timing of this. Councilmember Glover, for example, has been with me in the council for 7 years. Councilmember Cooper has been 2 years here. They could have filed this legislation anytime in the last 7 years, 2 years, and we will already have the funding to repair all these buildings that are badly in need of repair. So I agree with Councilmember Elrod. The priority here, the urgency, is to fix this building, so they will last another 100 years. They are buildings that were built temporarily after the fire. They were not meant to survive, and they were haphazardly laid down on the side. Because of my background in architecture, I can tell you that we can do it much better, more efficiently. Anyway, so if this could have been done any time, if we could have filed this any time, why now? And the only thing that I think comes to mind is that they want to derail this deal, that they want to delay it to the point that it just goes away. And so, personally, I think that the referendum will fail because Mayor Briley got overwhelmingly elected with a platform of doing this. So I think the majority of Nashville actually agrees with this. So why doing this? Well, it's an effort to drag it out and to delay it even further. And what happens if that happens? We have the majority of the people in Nashville that wants this project will be disenfranchised, because even though they end up voting for it, the deal may not happen. So I want to call your attention to that point. I mean, we are wanting to be democratic and representative and give people an opportunity to be part of something, but we are using this as a gimmick to kill a deal. And that is just not right, and so I'm going to vote against this.
Thank you. Councilmember Scott Davis.
Mr. Jameson, I have a question for you, sir. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm clear here. Okay? So, if I'm not, please forgive me, sir. All right. The council has the right, okay, no matter 100, right now, 100 million, 50 million, $10 million to ask for GO bonds to do improvements. Is that correct? Correct. So, hypothetically, okay, if I needed to do a GO bond for sidewalks in District 1, 2, and in South Nashville, or for other improvements that's badly needed in the city, this council can do that themselves, be it 27 votes, 21 votes. Is that correct? That's correct. So tomorrow, or next time we meet, I can ask, with the help of my colleagues, for $20 million in GO bonds, you know, for certain parts of the city, excluding mine, okay? But there's places all over, places in Madison, North and South Nashville that need improvements. And so this body can legally do that. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Withers.
Thank you. Actually, my colleague from District 5 really raises the point that gives me concern about this, which is that we have a process for going through capital improvements budgets and reviewing the capital spending plan in our county that is lengthy. It's debated for council members. We submit things. I think our new rules are in October. It doesn't get voted on until June at the very earliest. So all of those things go through a vetting process for overall issuance of general obligation bonds for capital improvements, such as building repairs and maintenance. And what I worry about with this particular proposal to have a referendum is that what my colleague described is what this will result in, is that we will have any number of referendum ballots that we will consider for each and every capital spending plan item, and that will sort of be a chaotic process. I think that we can always talk about process improvement, but that process improvement needs to be consistent across the county so everyone understands it and that everyone can participate in it equally, and also that the numbers make sense and that we're not voting on things as they are thought of depending on how a political decision goes. My own thought about this particular one, I'm somewhat in agreement with Councilmember Bednay that if a referendum were sought for this particular proposal that it could have been filed or considered very, very much earlier in this process than where we're at now, which to me is sort of at the very, very end stage after we've had multiple public hearings on it before different bodies and even before the council. And now finally we're going to go to a referendum vote after we've already had public hearings on the proposal, and I just feel that that's backwards. If that were the proposal, it should have been done at the beginning of this process and not at the very end when the council has already had a lot of public feedback on it. So I will not be supporting this this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mia Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I think, Councilmember Sledge stated, because this bond resolution is everything to do with this fairgrounds. And I would be so in favor of putting this entire project way month ago, when November, when we are first asked. If we were discussing that time, it would be appropriate. But legally, strangely, because we don't know which way our fairgrounds board will go until all this SP zoning and so forth. So it seems to me deciding if put the bond resolution right now is kind of rather inappropriate for me. So it would be right action would have been discuss this particular resolution after all the fairgrounds deal is considered. One way or the other, vote down or vote up. And then we can discuss if this, or we may not even have to discuss if the fairground, resolution fails by 27 votes, because we need 27 votes to this fairground, ordinance to advance. And if it doesn't advance, we don't even have to discuss this. So I think what we are doing is kind of backwards. So we should really discuss about the fairground resolution first, and then we decide how we go about it. But since we are not discussing, so this resolution will put us really awkward position if, for one scenario, if majority of the body agree this fairground deal is a good deal with considering community benefit agreement and so forth. If this body decide to move forward, this resolution will actually choke the ability to proceed new expo center or new infrastructure improvement. So it would delay, and so we are not doing any favor to any of us. So if we have to vote, unfortunately, I will have to vote no. So I wish we could go back and put this bill behind all the fairground related bill. Can I make that motion again, or would that be defeated? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We have circled around. We have a few council members back for the second time. Councilmember John Cooper.
Thank you. And very quickly, this is not about derailing soccer. It's about listening to the voters. But what's happened? And it's not about timing. Why the timing? This is the same night as the bond resolution itself is up, by the way. But what's happened since last November, when we were all here last November? Our finance director has told us that we're broke. And for everybody who did not find the money to pay the police or the firemen because we were broke, okay. Well, if you're not going to pay them, well then get permission from the voters for this $50 million. Okay, so, and then what's unusual about this? It's not in the CSP. We've been working on this for a year. Everybody goes, we're working on this for a year. Well, it's not in the CSP. There's not a CSP. Maybe there isn't a CSP because all of our money got spent here, and you didn't get anything for your district because we didn't have the CSP. So what this is doing is saying if you've got a special authorization, which this $50 million is, outside of our regular process, which is the CSP, then go ahead and have that extra check. Have that extra check with the voters, and particularly if you've already been told by your finance director that you're broke, and you stiffed all these people in Nashville, Tennessee because we're broke. Okay, that's the purpose for this referendum, and that is what is changed, and that is pretty darn legitimate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCosta Hastings.
Thank you. Would like to call for the question.
All in favor of calling for the question? Aye. Any opposed? No. Question passes. We are now ready to vote on the bill as substituted. I believe we'll just go straight to a machine vote. Madam Clerk, can you open the machine? Has everyone voted? All right, will you close the machine?
12 in favor, 25 against, and 2 abstentions.
Motion fails. Now we are on RS 2018-1385. You found it? Councilmember Blaylock requests grocery store operators within Davidson County to take effective measures to reduce the use and/or impact of single-use plastic carryout bags and report the measures being undertaken in this effort and encouraging the use of reusable bags by residents and businesses within Davidson County. Councilmember Blaylock.
Committee reports, please.
Councilmember Elrod.
Thank you, Madam President. We didn't have a letter from the sponsor, so we took no action, so defer by rule.
Thank you. Want to defer this one meeting, please?
Thank you. Defer one meeting. Now we are on RS 2018-1386. Sponsor is Hall. Request the Metro Sports Authority Nashville Soccer Holdings Development LLC and the mayor designate Metropolitan Council District 1 as the location for any practice facility constructed for use by the proposed Major League Soccer team. Councilmember Hall. There you go.
Thank you, Madam President. Clearly, this has been discussed amongst some people, and
Committee reports.
Committee report, please.
Coming up. Councilmember Sharon Hurd.
Thank you, Madam President. The Conventions, Tourism, and Public Entertainment Facilities Committee voted 6-4 and 1 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Haywood.
Rules Confirmation and Public Elections voted 6 in favor of and 0 against.
Thank you. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Clearly, initially, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so to speak, because this has been a conversation that's not new, but coming from a district that's considered to be a racially, ethnically concentrated area of poverty, as deemed by the MDHE and HUD report, considering that this body passed that report unanimously more than once, we're looking at this as an opportunity to create an economic catalyst for District 1. We have more than an abundance of land, and we'd like to be utilized for something other than some industrial projects. And so I think we propose or provide an excellent option or opportunity for the city and for the district to come together and create something that, again, will create an economic opportunity for that district.
Thank you. I see some people in the queue. Councilmember Scott Davis.
Left over from last.
Left over from last. Where did everybody come from? Councilmember Kobe Flood, you left over from last time?
No,
you are new. Welcome back.
Thank you. I want to rise in support of my colleague's bill for a couple of reasons. One, I think he's fighting for his district, and I think rightfully so. I think it's got a lot of merit to it, quite honestly. And then I also wanted to add that in one of the committee conversations that we had an explicit conversation because I asked about the practice facility being in Davidson County in particular, because we have seen some franchises in other cities where the practice facility actually goes out of county. So the municipality or the county loses on what can be $10 million plus in revenue and economic impact. And I think we all want to see this stay in Davidson County, and I would particularly be pleased to see it in District 1. So I'd ask colleagues to support our colleague on this resolution.
Thank you. Councilmember Hastings.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I just wanted to rise in support of my colleague here. We both represent Bordeaux,
in our community. Of course, he stated perfectly today about the reasons why. And the question that the community continues to ask is, why not Bordeaux? Why not come to North Nashville? We have ample amount of land, and we are the side to where all of downtown has not expanded out to. I wanted to also stand and encourage the individuals that make those decisions to properly make that decision to come over into our community, because I know that there will be other things that they will have to come back to this committee or for this council for in the future. And we look forward, and we will remember everything that is moving forward from this time forward. So at this time, we continue to push. We're working really hard to redevelop our community, especially in North Nashville and Bordeaux. We want this, and we want to move on this, and let's support our fellow council member.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I stand in support too of Councilmember Hall, being that I grew up in District 1, even though the last couple of years I represented District 19, which was the downtown area, but know the importance of having catalysts, as he said, in activating communities. When we put the baseball park over in the 19th District in Germantown, there is no denial that it served as a wonderful catalyst, and I know they will do the same. So I appreciate you coming in, jumping right in there and advocating for your community. And even though I do not live there, I am from there, and I'll never forget where I came from. So I rise and stand in full support, knowing the importance of activating with certain projects communities and what this could really do to uplift the community. And we just ask for strong consideration. So thank you so much for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Schulman.
Thank you, Madam President. I also stand, I like this idea. I've been looking at it, and I think it's a good idea. I really do appreciate the fact that Councilmember Hall is working on trying to figure out ways to improve this district. I think this is a good thing. I know it's non-binding, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the rest of the votes. But I think it's worth voting for, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bending.
I want to, I guess I'm a broken record, but I also wanted to support our brand new brother here, council member, and I really appreciate the idea that he recognizes that the economic catalyst that soccer will do when it comes to Nashville. So I appreciate it, and I want to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Dowell.
I just want to echo the same comments as a district that has nothing but soccer fields. I would be happy to, I told him we'd be happy to donate a few of ours and move them out that way because we have no place to walk without being hit with a soccer ball. So we'll be happy to have some of those moved out your way where we can get our walking trails back. So I'm excited that he wants it. I wholeheartedly support it. And we can start tomorrow. Get some little league teams out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Bending.
I just wanted to clarify, we just got funded for a new multi-purpose soccer fields. I think she's referring to those fields. They are not soccer fields, they are multi-purpose soccer fields. People are welcome to play soccer there, but they can also play other sports. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Target.
I too stand in support of Councilman Hall. If I don't want soccer at the fairground, I damn sure don't want it in Grossville. So the only thing I can say is Councilman bless your heart.
Councilmember Hurd.
Call for the question, please.
All right, call for the question. You were the last one in the queue. It's been moved and seconded and discussed. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we are on bills on first reading. If there is no objection, we'll consider all ordinances on. Yes, sir. Pardon me? Mr. Glover.
Didn't we just vote on calling the question and we didn't actually vote?
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
corrected. Sorry.
Thank you.
So we are back on the bill, 1386. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. I thought that's what we voted on. Right. Okay, the vote was on the bill. But we did it twice, so now it's really done. That's great. Now, back to bills on first reading. If there's no objection, we'll consider all ordinances on first reading in one vote at this time. Is there a motion to adopt all items on first reading? Having been properly moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. On to bills on second reading. First is DL 2018-1293. Sponsor is Gilmore. This amends the Metro Code to impose a privilege tax on the sale of tickets to events at the new Major League Soccer Stadium. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. I think we had a little discussion about this earlier. Oh, you know what? You're right about that. Let's do that. Let's start there. Let's start with committee reports. Committee reports, please.
Budget, Councilmember Berger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Budget and Finance recommended approval, 13-4-0 against.
Thank you. Codes, Councilmember Swope.
Codes, Fairs, Farmers Market recommended approval, 7-4-0 against.
Thank you. Convention, Councilmember Hurd.
Thank you, Madam President. Conventions, Tourism, and Public Entertainment voted 7-4 and 0 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you for keeping me appropriate. First, I do want to thank the three chairs of the various committees. I do think that's very important that they let the bill come forward, consider there were two similar bills on the floor. So I do appreciate that. There was one time on the council that they would just kill your bill back in the day. So I do appreciate that. So what we have is we have two bills with the same goals and the same amount of money, which is the $3, but they just do it in increments. And Councilman Sledge's came a little bit after mine. I wish we would have worked together on it, but I'm going to withdraw my bill since the other chairs worked with me on it so graciously. I appreciate that, the chairs of the committee. But once again, we had the same goal, and that was just to improve the overall infrastructure as we move forward. We know that that's important. You can do 10% of the overall ticket price, and that's regulated by the state. Same goal, just done a little bit differently. I have no problem withdrawing my bill. Once again, I want to thank the chairs for allowing my bill to go through. And at this time, I will withdraw my bill and co-sponsor with Councilmember Sledge. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Bill is withdrawn. We'll move on to 2018-1313. Sponsor is Virture. Approves a contract between the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity Empowerment and the United Way of Metro Nashville to provide one-on-one financial counseling and other financial education activities at no charge to low-income residents. Councilmember Virture.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem Speaker. What we call y'all? I have you want me to give the committee reports, or do you want me? Okay. Budget and Finance recommended approval as substituted, and the substitute 14-4-0 against. And there is a substitute, and I would like to move the substitute.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. The substitute has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the substitute? All those in favor of the substitute?
Aye.
We're just talking about the substitute. We'll get to the real bill in just a second. Any opposed? Now you're on your bill as substituted.
Okay, and I'll just briefly explain what the substitute is. It's basically a strike through from referring to the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity and Empowerment to strictly just through the Mayor's Office. That's what the substitute is.
Thank you. We have a few council members in the queue. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. My main question here is, I know that United Way has already been active in this work and in this process. I know, too, that the Cities for Financial Empowerment have supported Nashville's effort. I think this has been one of the most important and impactful programs in the entire city, honestly, for helping people both eliminate debt and increase savings. I guess I'd like to hear from the administration, I just want to make sure I'm reading this right, that this is extending a programmatic opportunity to United Way, but that this is not moving the entire policy of financial empowerment out of the Mayor's office. Thank you.
Your mic is on.
Councilman, that is correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurd.
Thank you. I just stand to recuse myself, but I do think that it's an awesome bill that's being passed, because I know that those individuals that is targeted will be very pleased, and education is always good, and I am so happy to see this opportunity availed to me.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, to make a note that Councilmember Hood is recusing herself. Councilmember Berger.
Move for approval.
Is there a second? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is BL 2018-13-14, sponsors Cooper and Berger. Establishes a Blue Ribbon Commission consistent with annual operating budget for fiscal year 2019 to identify government efficiencies. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Madam President. Committee reports.
Let's see, Councilmember Berger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Budget and Finance recommended a 1 meeting deferral, 14-4-0 against.
Thank you.
And I propose a 1 meeting deferral.
Is there a second? It's been moved to defer 1 meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed? Bill is deferred. Next is BL 2018-13-15. Sponsor is Mendez. Creates a tax increment finance study and formulating committee. Councilmember Mendez.
Committee reports, please.
Budget and Finance recommended approval, 14-4-0 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
I'd like to move approval with a brief explanation.
Recognized.
Thank you. So this bill would create a tax increment financing study group. The motivation is that I think, as we all know, and we just experienced with the Donaldson TOD debate over the last couple months, there continue to be a lot of questions from the public about how tax increment financing works in Nashville. Many feel that it's opaque and not very transparent. And with the TOD concept, there's a possibility of expanding tax increment financing widely. So this would create a study group of 7 people that would have 6 months to do their work. 2 members would be appointed by MDHA, 2 by the mayor, 3 by the council. And the idea is that the study group would come up with ideas about how to possibly improve how tax increment financing operates in Nashville. The study group itself wouldn't have any authority to do anything other than make recommendations, and then it would be up to some combination of the council and MDHA to decide what to do with those. So I appreciate your support here on second reading.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. I think the sponsor might have just addressed this. My reading of it saw the 6 months to submit, but I didn't. It wasn't explicit about the dissolution in Section 4, but I just want to make sure that we are. This is a process that sets a kind of a timer and does not necessarily establish a permanent new committee. Is that correct?
Councilmember Mendez.
That is certainly the intention.
Got it. And I recognize we can extend it beyond the 6 months, but I just want to confirm that this is to do a specific body of work. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jameson, can you confirm that's what the language says?
That is the language.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't remember hearing a second.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no one else in the queue, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Now we're on bills on third reading. First up is second substitute BL 2016-414, sponsors Scott Davis. Changes 4.86 acres from R6 to SP zoning for various properties along Elvira Avenue, Maynard Avenue, and Keeling Avenue to permit a maximum of 180 units. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to ask for committee reports and also move the substitute with a brief explanation.
Okay, I'll start with committee reports. Planning and zoning. Councilmember Bending.
The committee recommended approval of the substitute 12-4-0 against, but also pass a motion to re-refer to the commission and defer for the appropriate meeting 6-4-3 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I am not, I want to be very clear, I do not want this bill to be sent back, to the commission or the plan staff. And this is why, and I'll go into other reasons too, why we need to support this bill. In the last 2 years, while working on this, with community input, the policy has changed in the area. It was in evolving, now it's maintenance. So, this bill will be disapproved regardless. Now, what has changed in the last 2 years? We started off at 280 units. We have gone down to 72 units. We've still kept the affordability aspect because we have 3-bedroom, 2 baths with our family size for less than $300,000 in the urban core, which is hardly unheard of. Second, we have a letter of support from the IBEW, which has a signed contract and signed agreements, with the builder. We support bills all the time where individuals have outside contracts. We have a CPA that we're going to be discussing coming forward, where labor is included, which affordable housing is included. This bill has changed. We've taken out Maynard Avenue in the bill, which I share with Council Lady Vanderleest. That's gone. And if you look on your desk, you'll see a letter of support from the IBEW. They are saying, vote yes, don't vote no, don't abstain. Because it's a no to them. And this is not my words. Mr. Shaw and his wonderful people were here today, talking to a lot of us. And also there was a discussion of whether I've had a community meeting or not. There's a letter letting you know I did have a community meeting. My district had a meeting about this. I live one street away from this off of Thomas Avenue, which is right around the corner. This is half a block from Trinity Lane. Butts up against the Metro Recycling Center in my neighborhood. I'm asking for your support. You love the union, we all do. We want to give them these jobs. We love affordable housing. We need 3-bedroom, 2 baths at an affordable rate. And this may be a little upsetting, but I love my wife. I would not put something this close to my house to make me sleep on the couch or outside with my dog. So I'm asking for your support. Labor is asking for your support. And we just celebrated Labor Day. And for that, I honor your request and ask for your approval.
Do you want to move the substitute?
I'd like to move the substitute. I apologize.
That's okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the substitute, or shall, okay, we'll vote on the substitute, then we'll come back to the people in the queue. All in favor of the substitute? Aye. Any opposed? Substitute passes. Now we're on the bill as substitute. I do have several people in the queue. Councilmember Van Rees.
Thank you very much. I appreciate how the community involved themselves in this process, both in District 5 and District 8. And part of that process was for them to come together for a policy change. This bill, as amended, has had no publicly notified meeting, has had very little conversation with neighbors. And the process is there for a process. I can't even imagine going through an SP, going through community meetings, going through the planning commission, going through the council, and then deciding that at the very last minute on third reading, because of a change that I'm going to be able to get in on amendment, a change to SP that changes it this dramatically in order to, by the council member's own admission, circumvent a policy change. I request for this to simply follow the process. Go back to the planning department for review, go back to the planning commission, have some meetings with the neighbors, and then let us see it again on public hearing at a later date.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. This is just a question from Mr. Jameson on process per an issue that was raised earlier. With a substantive change like this, is it effectively bound back to planning anyway?
So Rule 21 is the last sentence that typically governs here. And what that envisions is, in most instances, you'll have a bill that planning is approved. And then there's an SP change. And the question is, well, would planning still approve that? And staff makes that determination. So here, the recommendation is disapproval. There's an SP change. And so that last line of Rule 21 says, if the changes are less restrictive, you can't rely on the original recommendation. But it's a slightly different animal here because it's disapproval. So if it doesn't go back to Planning Commission, he'll be moving a disapproved bill tonight. It would require 27.
Thank you. I guess with that, encourage, as Councilor Van Rees, the sponsor, to go through the recommended process. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Hastings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Pro Tem. I would just like to rise. I know Councilman Davis has had a lot to go on, especially within this district, especially with the zoning matters. But I want to rise and support. I am actually directly over on the other side of the street from Councilwoman Van Rees and Councilman Davis. That community is changing a great bit. I can't say that my community is doing the affordable housing thing or even bringing it down to substance. We need a source of affordable housing in this city. It's not happening too often in District 2. District 2 is way up there right now. We're selling houses at $500,000, which if we could have gotten ahead of the rim, we would have been okay. But I encourage you, if you would today, to support the councilman on this because people are looking for places to live. We have no places for them to go, especially if we're bringing it down on the level to where it is reasonable, because the rent and the cost of housing has skyrocketed and our pay has went nowhere. And we have to address that, and we need to start someplace. I'm not going to say that it's perfect or everything is done by the, I don't know actually what's happened, because that is not necessarily my district. But I can say we do need to start someplace, and I think we need to start right here with any way that we can help out our constituents here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I am in support of process and procedure. It will be the right thing will be to send back to Planning Commission for re-evaluation. So if this new decreased density proposal is the right location and the right type of project, it may come back as an approved bill. So that will be the right course. We have no doubt Councilman Scott Davis is working for the community. He always does and listen to the people. So that portion I'm not questioning at all. However, if you are to vote, I would like to caution my colleague. Sometimes, approving this disapproved bill or overriding Planning Commission's recommendation, you do have unintended consequences later. So the reason I'm bringing up is the Greece, bill. Later on, we will be discussing. That was originally the zone change. Previous council member changed the zoning from residential and commercial to SP, which allow open space and retail as well as industrial use. That's what previous body did. So that was disapproved 10 years ago. So now we are asked to consider grease plant on that SP rather close to residential area. That is because, as a body, it was previous body 10 years ago. But nonetheless, the body override Planning Commission's recommendation to change SP. And so this one will take 27 votes as of right now. And we have no doubt, Councilmember Scott Davis's work and so forth. But we have to be very, very vigilant and diligent what kind of bill we will be approving. Sometimes, councilmanic courtesy to rely on one person's decision is not good enough for the community. So I would like to caution you if you are to decide to vote tonight. Because, yes, density is reduced, but one of the conditions, 5% of all units shall be sold or below 90% of AMI. That condition was scratched off. And as well as, there will be no park, no greenway, no traffic study, because unit is under 100. So legally, we are not required to do the traffic study. So all of these conditions has changed. So if you want to go ahead and vote, please be mindful of this, what this project will bring.
Thank you. Councilmember Schulman.
Thank you, Madam President. So let me go back and check on something. So what I'm trying to do is still understand the process. It goes back to Councilmember Van Rees. Is there, and I understand there may be some discrepancy in the rule, but in order to send it back to the Planning Commission, does this body have to make a motion to send it back? Or is it up to the council member to send it back?
What the council would need to do would be to defer, because this is on third reading. It's not going to help matters to send it to Planning Commission if it's approved on third. So there would be a deferral. The committee made a recommendation to re-refer to commission. It did not specifically make a deferral motion. I think that was the implication for this floor. And then it would go to the Planning Commission. You could move to defer with a re-referral to the Planning Commission.
Okay, so it just has to, the body has to defer and then refer it back to the
Once it goes to go to the Planning Commission, it would have to defer.
But it's not an automatic just because of the change.
Right. So you would defer and move to re-refer to the Planning Commission.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anthony Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm rising in support just for a couple of reasons. One, I accepted Mr. Jamieson's
Oh, sorry.
Apparently you did not accept that explanation. Thank you, Chair. One, accepted the explanation, and again, I think he's got a high threshold being a disapproved bill, so of course if you're not in support, just vote no, but I think with the compromises made on the density, obviously there's been a much lower density than the original plan, and then the bonus of the IBEW support there as well with the work that's going to be granted there, for me is enough to support. So I rise in support. Hope you'll vote up or down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Withers.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I'm really struggling with this one, folks. We had earlier quite a bit of community feedback about at least the original proposal. We've had a fair amount of community feedback about the level of development within District 5, which has actually resulted in a community plan change process at the Planning Commission level. And so, I support my labor folks, and I want my labor folks to understand that, yes, the Metro Council, we want to have good jobs in our community that build up, especially smaller contractors, provide opportunities for apprenticeships. We want all of those things, but we are also elected to represent the people. And what I'm actually hearing from the community members is not so much that they feel that the changes that have been made make everything better, or that they fit with what the community did with the community plan. It's that they feel a sense of, to use a word in an email, inevitability. There is a sense of just defeat that some members of the community are feeling with regard to development and whether or not their voices are heard in development decisions that this body makes. And so this really is a struggle for me. And more than anything, I just wanted to rise and say, to community members that you are heard and that we struggle to balance councilman courtesy sometimes with, whether or not it really is a good decision for the county from a planning standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint. Is this helping us to get sidewalks, springways, connectivity, all of those things that we hear about in the community largely. All those concerns are heard, and so, I want my friends in labor to understand that, it's possible that y'all could get a contract on a bill that, frankly, is harmful to the community because of its density or its layout or just where it's located relative to street connectivity networks. So I'm really struggling on this one. I think one of the things that comes to my mind after hearing the explanation from Mr. Jamieson is that, yes, in fact, that this bill likely would go before the Planning Commission if we were to re-refer it there, would come back as a disapproved bill, and so it would still require 27 votes. I guess ultimately for me, I'm trying to determine, is it better just to go ahead and have the vote on 27 today or at a future date after a Planning Commission public hearing? There's no question that the density is lower. The community members did mention that they appreciate how well the contractor worked to incorporate community feedback as much as it can. But I just wanted to rise and say that there are projects that are good officially for the economy. They're officially good for contractors. They're good for labor, but can still actually be harmful for the community in some ways, or can make the community feel that they're defeated and not heard. And I just wanted to rise and say to those community members that you are heard today. We have a difficult choice to make today, and we'll see where it goes on vote. I think I'm probably inclined, based on what I've heard from Mr. Jameson, to go ahead and vote on the bill today rather than for a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Madam President. I think all these issues have been well raised and well discussed. It does sound like there is some issue of, if not urgency, there is a timeline and a deadline on some of this. And given that the council member has worked on the density level and significantly reduced it to a level that, quite frankly, in another urban core district, we've worked fairly well on getting this sort of density and above. And I think Councilman Davis is trying to accomplish, again, some of the goals that we've set out, both in legislation we're going to discuss later, and legislation that we've been discussing throughout our term. I know this is difficult. I know it's tough that there may never be enough community meetings on certain things to be able to get everybody approval. But I think he has tried to listen to the community and its density work. The folks who are the applicants on his application, I have worked with as well as a council member, and they keep their word. I think this is a group that could really create something that would be quality for the area. I'm inclined to support Councilman Davis because, again, I don't think we're going to see this come back with a different vote threshold. So really what we're talking about is, do we think that this plan's appropriate, and do we think that the other attenuating factors are enough to get us through there? So,
thank you. Councilmember Hurt.
I know they answered the questions or asked the questions that I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Dow.
Thank you. I just want to rise in support of Scott Davis and this zone change. One of the biggest issues I hear in the city consistently is that we need more housing. And I hear it a lot from a lot of people in here. We all say that we support affordable housing and we support housing. Yet I constantly see when several of Councilman Davis' bills come up, there's always a lot of issues in the planning department with it and people against it. People want to live in the core of our city, and I think we should look forward to finding opportunities to allow them to live there. And having a little density in these areas, I think what we've seen, a lot of our core has infrastructure to support the density. They have access to downtown, the sidewalks, and all of those things. So this is a good place to go in and add the density, and plus it appeals to the young people. So we're giving people an opportunity to have a place to live, and I think we need to be conscious of that, and especially giving them an opportunity to have a place to live within the core where they want to be versus out in the suburbs. So we should all rise in support of Councilman Davis and create this opportunity to provide housing for people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone in the queue. Councilmember Davis.
Make a move for approval, please.
Been moved and seconded. Because it needs 27 votes, we'll go to a roll call vote. Your machine.
Just vote your machine, I'll vote mine.
Yeah, but you're not working. Has everyone had a chance to vote? Not yet. Still waiting on a few people. Okay. Madam Clerk, please close the machine.
32 in favor, 4 against, and 2 abstentions.
Motion passes. Next is BL 2018-1203, sponsors Rosenberg, amends the Metro Code relating to scooters, inline skates, and roller skates by creating new definitions for scooters and business district and modifying certain requirements. Councilmember Rosenberg, wait a minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Glad to be here on the last bill of the night. This is the other scooter bill, the unmotorized scooter and unshared motorized scooter bill. And pending any questions, I move approval.
Been moved and seconded. Say, whoops, one person in the queue. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. I was wondering if the sponsor had considered accepting an amendment that would require helmets in this chamber.
He's sitting down. I think that means we're ready to vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is BL 2018-1229, sponsors Bednay. Changes 49 acres from AR2A to SP zone for properties located at 6397 Pettis Road and Pettis Road unnumbered east of Nolensville Pike to permit 145 single-family lots. Councilmember Bednay.
That's me.
That's you.
I think we don't have any committee report.
Correct.
So this is a site that so many iterations. We had community meetings. We actually, I discouraged and told some of the original developer that came to that site that because the community didn't want it, that it wouldn't happen. On the last iteration, the community actually supported the project. They liked it. And that's pretty hard in my district. People are tired of development. But they supported it, so I allowed it to move forward. So we had community meetings. Like I said, we had the public hearings, and you saw that people didn't come speak against it or in favor. Well, they were in favor, but they didn't speak because there was no decision. So all that to say, it's one of those painless things where things finally worked out, people were in support, and I'm asking you to honor them by voting in favor of these results. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is BL 2018-1245, sponsor Sledge and O'Connell. This applies 42.96 acres of a neighborhood conservation overlay district for various properties along South Street, Villa Place, Wedge Avenue, 15th Avenue South, Tremont Street, and Edge Hill Avenue. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Madam President. We've got all committee reports in. I'm going to move a substitute with a brief explanation.
Okay, you ready now?
Thank you. So this substitute merely takes out of 2 properties. I believe that's actually in Councilman O'Connell's district after talking with his constituents, so I would ask for the support on the substitute.
Okay, we're voting on substitute has been seconded. All those in favor of the substitute? Any opposed? We're on your bill as substitute.
Okay, I'm going to move the substitute with a less brief explanation. So as you all know, we had a pretty robust public hearing here and also at the Planning Commission regarding this. This is the Edge Hill Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. It has been approved by the Planning Commission. It was approved by the Historic Commission, came here. We had our discussion. What we were asked by several members, several colleagues, was to go back to the community, talk with the community, work to see if we can find area for compromise, grounds for, kind of coming together. The good news is that we have had productive conversations in that. And in particular, I think Councilman O'Connell will be able to speak more to a few of the details, but we both have been in conversation with those who support and those who are opposed to the overlay, and we already have some guideline changes that we will be proposing, submitting, and supporting to the Historic Commission. Just a brief process note, those guideline changes don't come to us. They only go to the Historic Zoning Commission. So we have committed to bring certain ones of those that Historic has already said they'll be okay with, that kind of give, mostly for infill development, give a little bit more leeway. And the biggest thing I think is infill development being allowed to do 2 stories. There are some things that we haven't hammered out yet, quite frankly, whether it's Some more things that those who oppose overlay had requested that probably aren't doable within a conservation overlay, or those that we're actively pushing for that we're trying to make sure get into those guideline changes. We have notified all folks for and against or undecided our intention to move this tonight, but with the explicit, adamant support of moving forward with guidelines changes as soon as possible. And we do have some of those already hammered out. Like I said, we'll be getting more soon. And I will probably turn it over to Councilman O'Connell. I would ask for your support, but with the recognition that we still have work to do, but it will be done at the Historic Zoning Commission level.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to Councilman Sledge as lead sponsor on this bill. He did a very good job of kind of giving an update on the progress we made. I know after the public hearing and hearing from both sides, in recognition that this was not a bill that achieved full consensus within the community. But we did receive input throughout. The substitute Councilman Sledge just offered brings us to kind of conformance with input that was heard in front of the Planning Commission. So we did remove a few parcels on the boundary that in fact did not contain residences. And so while there were some folks who wanted to kind of keep the integrity of that portion of one of the streets within the overlay boundary, we decided this was a very simple request to honor, similarly to his point on the design guidelines here. We did make some progress, and I think given our mutual commitment to working again with both sides afterward, we can continue to make further progress. We already have a package of revisions that we have a commitment from Metro Historic staff that would be favorably reviewed and probably receive a recommendation in front of the Metro Historic Zoning Commission. And to Councilman Sledge's point, I think we've got time afterward to work with both sides. I think one of the keys here is that Councilman Sledge and I sat down with leaders of both those who have opposed or been skeptical of the overlay, as well as those who were supportive, to hammer this out. And that meeting, though, the timing of this, for those who have supported it for more than a year at this point in the conversation versus those who have, asserted that they found out too late to make a difference. I mean, the moment in that room gave me a lot of optimism, because the people that have supported the overlay didn't reject any of the kind of groupings of items sought by skeptics and opponents as non-negotiable. And frankly, the folks that were seeking some revisions did an incredible amount of homework and came up with a number of extremely reasonable requests, and we're going to continue to work on those. So here's where we are. The overall level of support for the overlay is largely unchanged, but the revisions to the design guidelines are not technically connected to the legislative process, and I remain committed to ensuring that we get the best possible, most equitable design guidelines with broad support. At this point, I'm sure that everyone in this room knows this has been a difficult conversation. Supporters are hoping to save their neighborhoods. Opponents think this is the wrong tool to do so. There's no residential neighborhood in District 19 that exists with as much tension between growth and preservation. I don't know that Councilman Sledge would agree, but that very well could be true of District 17 as well. I have concluded that this is, in fact, after multiple years of representing District 19 and spending a tremendous amount of time in Edge Hill, that this is the best tool available to those who've toiled for more than a decade, frankly, to try to make Edge Hill one of Nashville's best neighborhoods and a truly historic neighborhood. I remain supportive of the overlay and hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I just wanted, if the two gentlemen could speak to it again. I had received a couple of texts about, I think some of them, a couple of houses, and I think they spoke about it, or opted out, and if they could just speak to that. I do support it, but somehow I got pulled into it, and they said I was in collusion. So if you could just speak to why those were pulled out and express it, I think that would be great. And also I do want to thank you for your hard work, because overlays are very contentious, and at the end of the day, some people are going to be happy and some people are going to be very upset with you. So thank you so much for your hard work.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Yeah, I think this is something that is a part of the boundary area in District 17. There had been some discussion and negotiation that Councilman Sludge had been involved with. The properties on the northern portion of District 19, I don't think there has been anything. I don't know about any accusations of collusion here. I do think there might have been, I believe Councilman Sludge is at the planning table right now, checking on the possibility of something that is more of a clerical order here. He might be able to speak to it when he is back at his desk just to see. If there are others, Madam President, we could maybe see if anybody else is in the queue to discuss, and we'll try to come back and revisit this in just a minute. Thank you.
The queue is empty, so you need to make, tell us about the guidelines.
Well, yeah, and I think too, if it's in Councilmember Sledge's district, if he could just explain it and explain the process and how he arrived at that, because we do know that when you do an overlay, that most, if not all of the people are supposed to remain in that overlay, and just maybe explain how those persons got opted out.
Well, to Councilor Gilmore's point, I believe there's been clerical errors, so we're trying to figure that out on the fly here. Because there is a portion of the overlay on 15th Avenue South where there were two properties that initially been taken out, but because Historic felt like the contiguousness of the block was needed to keep them together, I have requested that they be put back into the overlay. That is not in the substitute before you. So I've been trying to figure out what's appropriate from a parliamentary procedure in attempting to get those properties in. I'll yield to Attorney Jameson.
Could move to suspend the rules to offer a late file amendment to the substitute that adds back in
1722 and 1724, 15th Avenue South.
So the first order of business would be a motion to suspend the rules for purposes of offering amendment.
Is there objection to a suspension of the rules? Seeing none, Councilmember?
So this is a little mortifying, to be quite honest. These two properties, I spoke with property owner, I spoke to their neighbor, I spoke to basically everybody on the block to try to figure out where everybody was. And Historic, Robin in particular, had said that she felt that if those two properties were taken out, quite frankly, the whole piece would go, and that was fairly, I mean, there were some significant properties in that piece. So my request was to ensure that those addresses go back in. So my amendment on the substitute, or I guess offering that, would be to re-include 1722 and 1724 15th Avenue South.
To put them back in?
To place them back in the
Okay.
boundary. It would restore the boundary that this body considered a few weeks ago.
There's been a motion, is there a second? Discussion on the motion? There are three people in the queue, do you want to discuss the motion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on the motion to put these two properties back in. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes, amendment passes. Councilmember Sledge?
So I may ask for a little bit, maybe from Councilor Gilmore, of the question she asked again, because I wasn't quite listening quite honestly when that discussion was happening between her and Councilman O'Connell.
Do you have further questions for?
Well, I think because he was walking around, he missed it, but I just want to say thank you for doing that. And maybe if you can just explain to, I think the public, the question was at the time the process, but you shared that it was a clerical error. So I think that everything's been cleared up on how those two properties were omitted. So I think that's just important for the public to hear and those listening at home.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurd.
Thank you, Madam President. I basically just want to stand and also thank the two councilmen for the work that they did, because I was very torn with this particular legislation. But since that time, I know that I was one that requested that they go back and meet with the residents, and I've heard from quite a few of those residents, and I've actually been converted to make a decision. And I just wanted to thank them for the work that they did, and just stand in support. Thank you.
Councilmember Withers.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I would like to rise in support of my colleagues from District 17 and 19. I have been fairly fortunate that most of our overlay discussions in District 6 have been quite a bit more smooth than some of the discussions in other parts of the county have been. But you know, nevertheless, we've had a lot of discussion in the community, and particularly in the Tennessean and some other publications, about the cost of growth and change in Nashville. And, you know, a lot of those pictures of that conflict focus on this very area. And we also hear a lot from community members with regard to preserving at least the context of the William Edmondson home site, which of course the land is there, but the home is not. And that's just such a good example of, you know, there are houses that have a particular significance to the city, and once they're gone, and you'll never get them back. And sometimes what we see in communities is that we have these discussions about local zoning ordinances for historic protection. They go on for a long period of time, and during that period of time you lose quite a bit of that context that you were trying to preserve in the first place. So again, the conservation overlay is the more lenient of the historic overlays. Just want to reiterate that point. There is historic preservation zoning, such as in a few neighborhoods, but the conservation zoning overlay is a little bit more lenient, does not review what goes on inside the house, often allows fairly substantial additions to the rear of historic houses. It sounds like, as I've been following this discussion, that the two council members have worked with historic to make these design guidelines even more permissive than what we would have in Lockwood Springs, for example. So it sounds to me as though quite a bit of compromise has taken place, and in the interest of preserving some of the historic context that we do have left in the Edge Hill community, I would encourage everyone to vote in favor of this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we're on BL 2018-1280, sponsors Hastings and Swope. Approves plans for a non-hazardous liquid waste processing facility to be located at 2832 Whites Creek Pike. Councilmember Hastings.
Thank you very much, Madam Pro Tem. We're back here today with
Committee report?
Yeah, committee reports,
Committee
please.
report.
Thank you.
Councilmember Elrod.
Madam President, my apologies. Public Works Committee recommended approval, 6 in favor, 1 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Hastings.
All right, thank you again, Madam Pro Tem. I just wanted to say we're back here today with an issue that is actually, ever since I've been in office, has been the hardest thing to deal with, especially an area to where our community has not seen an overall change in the positive way. In brief, we actually just had a meeting, for those of you doing the public hearing time, we actually had a meeting a week ago, and there were over 100 people in attendance. There were a great number of people that were there to continue to state and ask questions, and most of those questions were answered. There were questions dealing with the noise, smell, and also traffic issues. All of the questions were answered in due time, and the ones that we were not able to answer publicly were also responded to by actual telephone calls that we made sure that were answered. We also received many signatures in support of a change for our community. The on-site engineering environmental facility is actually an environmental place that actually takes in things and turn them over, and it actually helps with our water and sewer system as well. But again, there were many questions, going back, there were many questions about the noise, the smell, and also the traffic. Now that the facility will be moving closer to Brawley Parkway, there will not be trucks going through many neighborhoods over in the northeast Nashville areas, including on the Cowan Street corridor. We also looked into the area of continue to cleaning up our area. We also reviewed the overall call, and actually the only reason that this is before us today is not because this is a zoning change. This is not a zoning change. And actually the councilwoman spoke, Mina Johnson spoke earlier today, and said this was done by the prior council. There was an SP put into place, and that SP was put into place for retail and also some IWD things, light industrial as well. I just so happen to be in the seat right now of this council for District 2 that happened to deal with this issue. The legal issues were basically upon TDEC, and TDEC actually went through, and we also got a review from our codes and our planning departments that came back to us, the planning director that came back to us in letters to Mr. Jameson that actually responded to us and saying, listen, the facility has the right to be there doing what they do as far as the grease side. But because of the Jackson law that this body accepted is the only reason that this bill is before us, we cannot stop this facility from moving. We can only do the parts that we have to do as far as the Jackson law. And the Jackson law basically says this: on a percentage of what they do on the separation of oil and water, that is the only thing that they have that's before us. But as far as them moving to a facility that we have no control over, they can move. All right? What I would like to do today is actually move for approval with this issue. We have met the requirements of most people that have asked questions, and I'm sure there's others that will be calling and asking questions. I will be open to talk to them and answer any questions accordingly. I'd like to move for approval.
Thank you. We have a few people in the queue. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you. I have a few questions because there was a lot of back and forth from the neighbors and the community on this. And so I appreciate that the councilman, it sounds like, has done a lot of work to get back in the community and kind of quell some of those things. But I think for our peace of mind, I just wanted to ask, evidently there are some new TDEC requirements based on these types of facilities. And so I wanted to see if all the operations at this proposed site to be conducted indoors are under those new TDEC regulations.
Councilmember Hastings.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you. I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, it is. Everything will be done within one facility now. There will be no outdoors facilities which are at the old location, which we have to get rid of. It is not constructive for our growth in our community. We want to do better, and that is what we're going to do. And with that, the smell, under the TDEC rules, you cannot have smells coming out of the facility. Under TDEC rules, there are several things that are within the actual law that was actually put forth with some of our constituents that started to understand the rules. The rules say that those things have to be met.
All right, I've got one more question. There were, as you discussed, and some of the neighbors and the emails that we received were about traffic in the neighborhood and things like that. So what are the traffic impacts to the current site versus the proposed site? Can you describe some of those traffic changes, improvements, maybe not improvements? Can you just give us a rundown of that and the impact on the neighborhood as you see it? Thank you.
Currently, it's in a residential neighborhood where there's a lot of kids, and there's other individuals who are going, there's through traffic, there's school buses, there's a lot of other things that are going on with that area. We can help that. And that is the whole reason that this is coming aboard. I would not be going forth to move a facility that would not better off our community. If it wasn't to better our community, we would not be moving forward. Also, the other location that they are going into, actually, there is no other businesses there right now other than the rock quarry. There's a rock quarry and there's a whole piece of vacant land. And there's a community that's a little further off behind them, but there is also a buffer zone that will be a part of it, and also an enclosed building to where you will not smell it, you won't even see it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shulman.
Thank you, Madam President. I remember this on public hearing because it was late. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I remember there were there were 4 people that spoke for this, and then there were 25, 30 people, maybe even more than that lined up to speak against it. And I know that there were some issues regarding it all And I also know that the council member had a meeting at the North Police Precinct, which I thought was a really good thing to do because obviously there were issues. I think my concern is that we had heard from a number of folks who were against this before this was even came to public hearing. And I'm still hearing from the same people who say they're still against it. And so either the meeting at the North Police Precinct didn't change their minds or they just are continually against it. I'm not sure if the council member can speak to that, but at this point I just know that the idea was that I know they're concerned about what happens to them in that area. It's industrial. This is something else that's sort of being kind of thrown at the neighborhood. I worry about that, and to worry about people speaking out and then these things happening to the area around them. And I just can't vote for this tonight because of that concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Elrod.
Thank you, Madam President. As I've tried to do my own work on this, research on it, and looking at the documents. Of course, this is before us because of the Jackson laws. I stated before, there are 8 criteria that we have to look at that we are supposed to, of many, but particularly those 8 criteria. And then the applicant, which is on-site environmental, if we deny this tonight and vote against it, they have the opportunity to go to Chancery Court here in Davidson County, and that court looks at it totally new, de novo, and looks at the same criteria no matter what we decide or what we put forth tonight. Any arguments either for or against, it doesn't matter. The judge can look at it however he or she would like. So I think it's important for us though to still do our due diligence. I'm going to be voting personally for this tonight. I'm going to explain why, perhaps likely not briefly. Currently, right now, this is at a open air site that is a non-conforming use for what it is on because it has been rezoned. If you look it up it is on Baptist World Center Drive, on-site environmental. You can see it's very close to a neighborhood. There in Katie's Hill, it's right beside a creek, Pages Branch. It's just on the other side of the road from the river, so it's that's where the current site is, and it's open air. All of the odor can escape the site and move into surrounding properties. And it can stay there as long as it stays the size that it is and doesn't add to its uses or change them or expand. Going to the new site, it appears, personally I believe, it'll be beneficial to the area because it will move it out of a neighborhood into an industrial zoned site that will have everything done indoors. The property will be taking in 3 types of liquid. Grease trap material, oily wastewater, not oil, but oily wastewater, and leachate, which is liquid that comes off of landfills. But all of that can only be treated, right now it's currently treated, or can be treated open air at the current site. It would go to the new site and would be treated inside, indoors, with no odor escaping. And there it can be more highly regulated by Metro and by the state. Currently, of course, it is, as I said, as stated, it is zoned industrial IWD, I believe. And if you look in the packet that is before you, the last page that I have distributed on your desk is a site plan. There is a 300-foot buffer. The closest neighborhood is behind the property. There is a 300-foot buffer that is required by the current SP. Nothing more has to be done. So you can see where the environmental site is, and future retail can still go in front of it on the road. So for me, why I'm voting for it is basically you're swapping one bad location for a good location. And you're keeping odors inside instead of right now they're open air. And I imagine not smelling good, very good right now. But if this were to approve and they were to move, I think it would help North Nashville. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilmember Scott Davis.
I have a statement, then I have a question for either planning or legal counsel. I want to first apologize to Councilman Hastings. When initially looking at this, I thought he had frankly lost his mind. Because I saw the pictures, of the current plan and figure why in the world would he upzone a piece of property on the other side of his district to put that hot mess over there. And I was very concerned about it. Frankly, I was against it. Now, wherever it may fall right now, he is not moving that facility. That facility is gone. The new regulations, and I went to a neighboring city a couple hours away to look at a newer facility with indoors. There's no smells coming out of there. But 3 blocks up the road from my district, you go by there, you smell the place badly. Talk to his neighbors. I had the pleasure of going to one of his community meetings. He had people there for and against. And heard people like Katie Hill. They want it moved. And there are concerns. However, though, and this is my question for legal and for planning, was there a letter sent stating that the current site is properly zoned for this? Yes?
The planning department and codes department issued a joint letter, a joint memorandum, clarifying that this property is currently divided into 3 districts, A, B, and C. And District B of the specific plan specifically permitting a recycling facility, which would qualify under.
So Councilman Hastings is not upzoning this piece of property to allow this.
He is not upzoning the property. He is proposing a use. 2 of the 3 uses are covered under the Jackson Law. The 3rd use, the grease trap, is not covered under the Jackson Law, and they could by right locate in District B of the SP.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ranconet-Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the work that Councilman Hastings has done on this. You called me, talked to me about it, and I think I understand a little more than I did on the last vote about the process and what's involved in all of this. And I have talked to some more people about it, trying to get some education on it. So I think that I do understand that. I do just have 2 questions, though, and they may have already been answered. And one, let's see, Councilman Elrod said moving from a bad to a good location. Okay, so my 2 questions, number 1, is why is it actually moving from, because both of these are in your district. So why is it actually moving from where it is, and what does the other site have where it's moving that this one did not?
You recognize?
Just quickly, I assume that question is for me. One of the things that, the reason that this facility, and I think Councilman Elrod said it brilliantly. The facility where it is right now, there's a creek that's a part of that area. The river is right there. There is no room for them to do what they have to do on the current site. There is that the new facility is actually for them to build an enclosed location to where there's no smells, there's none of that stuff, as well as they are looking to build retail business in front of their location. So that is one of the things. They need a larger site to actually do the things that the community had actually did in the XP even before I was in office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam President. I too stand in opposition of this. I have received several telephone calls, emails, text messages, visits, and all the above in opposition. The concern that I have is that it really hasn't been much discussion about what's going to take place. And I think that a lot of this has been calculated probably years out in terms of what they want to do, because that area is becoming very popular now that Top Golf is over. in that area, and it's in close proximity to that. And it's really interesting because none of the people that I have on the list, and I lived in that community for over 13, well actually almost 15 years. And none of those, any of my neighbors called me saying that they were for this, but most of them called me and said that they were against it. So I cannot support this. I am concerned about the gentrification that may come and the development. And when the development comes, they say it's what people want, but are people of color part of the ownership of the developments that's being done? I want to know what the inclusion is for people in that particular community. And none of that has been discussed. I haven't heard anyone say anything about American Baptist College, which is closely involved in this location where they are now. And it just concerns me. And to me, for there to have been so much opposition then and now, I just cannot support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Hastings for all of his hard work, and I think I shared with him. Most of the time I can be with him, but on this one it's a little bit more difficult. I did have a question about the A, B, and C. I was trying to go back and look at my actual analysis. I could not put my hands on it. So we're saying, well, the question is, it appeared to me when I read it that part of it was zoned, but portions of it were not, as it related to the grease plant and the overall zoning. So I just want us to be clear about that, because it sounds like if we were to vote against it tonight, that it could still be built, and that's not my understanding. Like they automatically have those rights. That was my understanding from the analysis, and I think you kind of gleaned over it. But if you could just kind of peel back a little bit more, and we could just be a little bit more clear about it, and if this was voted in, if it is, does it automatically have rights whether we vote on it or not, and what parts of it are not included in those rights?
Sure.
That's my question.
So the proposed facility would essentially collect 3 types of materials. Grease trap facilities, mostly from restaurants, I assume, oily wastewater, and then a third thing called leachate, which is essentially water that is suffused through other materials. It collects those 3. The Jackson Law, for the purposes of, because the grease is actually removed from the waste stream, that considers it not part of the Jackson Law. They don't care what you do with the grease. With a grease trap facility, you do not have to get the Jackson Law approval. But the 2 remaining that this company wants to engage in, the oily water and the leachate, they need this council's approval tonight. The underlying zoning on the property on which they want to operate is zoned SP IWD. It allows industrial uses like this, but it's divided into 3 districts, A, B, and C. And B is where they want to locate. And B allows, in the codes director's opinion and in the joint memo issued by codes and planning, it would allow a recycling facility that a grease trap facility would constitute. So if this body were to shoot down to disapprove this bill, they could not move forward with any of the Jackson Law required provisions. They could not do the oily water collection. They could not do the leachate collection, which that's part of what they want to do. They could come back later and do grease trap facility relocation because that's not covered by the Jackson Law, and they have the underlying zoning to allow it.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarity. So it sounds like they're trying to add additional things that are not there, but they do have the one requirement for the grease trap. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so thank you for the clarity. Councilmember Hastings, normally I can support you, but the oily water, it just doesn't sound good. I'm sorry, I won't be able to support it. All right.
Councilmember Hagar.
From a council member that's an attorney, I call the question.
Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Question passes. So we are now voting on the bill. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call vote. Madam Clerk, can you open the machine? Everyone voted?
No brakes on.
Okay, please close the machine.
Get them all down that way, nobody's surprised.
31 in favor, 7 against, and 1 abstention.
Motion passes. Next is RS 2018-1289, sponsor Sledge and Berkshire. This approves the demolition of certain buildings and structures necessary for the construction of new Major League Soccer Stadium at the Fairgrounds Nashville and to impose a privilege tax on the sale of tickets to events at the new Major League Soccer Stadium. They clear the queue. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry.
Committee reports, please.
Okay, let me do this. Budget, Councilmember Berkshire.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Budget and Finance recommended substitute 14-4-0 against and an amendment 14-4-0 against. And the bill substitute and amended 8-4-4 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Swope.
Codes Fairs Farmers Market approved Amendment A, Amendment B, and the substitute, 6-4-0 against, and approved 1289 as substituted, as amended, 6-4-0 against.
Thank you. Convention, Councilmember Hertz.
Thank you. Conventions, Tourism, and Public Entertainment voted for amendments A and B, 6-4-0 against, and for the substituted bill or the amended bill voted 7-4-0 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. Planning, Councilmember Bedney.
Is it because I'm far from you?
That's it.
The Planning Commission recommended approval of the substitute, the amendment by Councilmember Allen, the amendment by Councilmember Freeman, and it approved a substitute and amendment 841 against.
Thank you. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Madam President. So first I'm going to offer a substitute with brief explanation.
Okay.
So as described by Councilor Gilmore, the substitute ordinance has been timely filed as something of a, I could say compromise, but it's more than that. It was really guided by Councilwoman Gilmore's good work. It would essentially create an escalator regarding the ticket tax in order to address long-term maintenance. The ticket tax that's already proposed would take care of that sort of, as we've termed in this body, sort of year-to-year maintenance. But this escalator would allow us to also have funds put away for long-term maintenance as well. So the underscored language that you see reflects that. The difference that this is between this bill and Councilman Gilmore's bill is that it does create that escalator. That is because the team had come to an agreement with the league about what their ticket tax and price would be. This falls within that, so as I described it, I think this kind of lives in the Venn diagram between the two. So it does set forth the increase in the ticket tax in order to address long-term maintenance. I know there were some questions in committee about what kind of funds that provides, so I'm going to yield and see what my colleagues would like to ask.
Thank you. Councilmember Pardue.
I lied about not speaking the Lord.
You're on a roll tonight.
I'm telling you, I can't help it. I think the good Lord's moving me. You know, we just passed a bill, 1245, passed it unanimously. And it was a bill, historic overlay to protect historic property. And Councilman Willis said it best. He said, well, when talking about historic property, when it's gone, it's gone. And I don't think we're giving the fairgrounds the same dedication that we're giving to historic Edgefield. And, yeah, I don't know what else to say to try to get you folks both right. But anyway, if we don't stop this, it's slapping every voter in this city in the face.
Thank you. Councilmember Gore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm only going to speak on this one because if we stand a chance, this is it. Here we are. We're down to the final debate. But if we pass this, and then we pass, and the reason I'm bringing this up, because then you'll pass the resolution for the $50 million, and we'll just keep on spending like we've got it to spend. And we don't. Simple as that. Now, we'll pretend like we do. We'll pretend like it's all going to pay for itself and everything's great. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure we remember in the budget cycle last year when I asked table up here, $74 million out of the reserve funds. Why is that in there? They said, well, we won't actually use it. It's kind of a thing we put in there, placeholder. We used it. We used it and then some. And so with this, we need to understand that about $4.6 million will pay the debt service, and then we're on the hook for up to $4 million for the first 5 years on the stadium, and then $3 million. So you might as well go ahead and budget $8.6 million for the first 5 years. It's pretty much so non-negotiable because they told us those are the numbers. So if we pass this, then everybody who votes for it needs to be able to look every Metro employee in the eye and say, yep, we know we broke our promise to you, but that really wasn't a promise because, well, we just didn't really understand what we were doing. Yeah, I think we knew exactly what we were doing. And I think we know exactly what we're doing right now. But the clear thing that to me is probably the most worrisome piece of this is that we did break our promise to every employee in this city. I think we're breaking our promise to the taxpayers and the voters in this city. And so therefore, if you do it, you just need to be able to look these employees in the eyes next year and explain again why we're not going to be able to honor it because we don't have the money. This may be the greatest thing in the world, but we don't have the money. We've been told it repeatedly. But here we go. We're going to pretend like we always do on this floor. We'll just sail right on through and we'll pretend like we've got the money until we get to the next budget cycle, and then all of a sudden we'll go, oh, we don't have any money. So with that said, I mean, I'm not going to, I haven't moved from the very beginning of this. I never thought it was a good idea. I still believe that the referendum spoke very clearly to us. I know we can all differ on what we think it said. I have my opinion, you have yours. Who says I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong? Who knows? I have a feeling we may be finding out. But I would urge you to please reconsider again. And if we do vote it, and we do go ahead and do this particular bill right here, just be prepared. Be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for Councilman Sledge. It expands on the question I posed in Budget and Finance regarding the ticket tax. I really wish Councilor Gilmore had not withdrawn her bill that had the $3 out of the box, because Mr. Curl was kind to run a quick analysis for me between Budget and Finance, and that would have garnered $30 million over 20 years, whereas it looks like what Councilman Sledge proposes at present would garner $23 million from a maintenance perspective. And I guess as I had asserted in Budget and Finance, and I continue to be concerned whether through our base case or our optimistic case, I think we've all seen with the Titan Stadium and our other public facilities like Bridgestone, despite best laid plans, there is never enough money in the bank to renovate and improve things as we should. And for a facility that is out in the sun and the rain 365 days a year, I am very much concerned about that long-term maintenance piece. So, Councilman Sledge, can you speak to how the bill was previously before substituted, and just what the projections are? You said that the ownership group had already come to an agreement with MLS as it related to the ticket tax, but I thought that was within our purview as a council to determine that. So I just wondered if you could speak to that, please.
Sure, I can speak to as much as I'm privy to, and we had mentioned, we had a similar discussion in committee. I'm not privy to the conversations that the team and the league were having regarding setting the initial price. I'm sure they were trying to set a price that was somewhere, again, speaking of Venn diagrams, in the middle of ensuring affordability on ticket prices, but also covering what we're calling this year-to-year maintenance. Regarding what I brought forward as a substitute, I'm trying to get more. Quite frankly, I'm trying to get more money so that we are addressing that long-term maintenance, because it has become an issue on some of our other facilities, especially our sports and entertainment facilities. I want to be very cognizant of that, and that's why I think Councilor Gilmore did such a great job of bringing that up. Again, when I brought this up to the administration to say, I'd like to incorporate this in some way, what I was told was, okay, let's see what we can do. There is an agreement between the team and the league. Let's see how it can fit in. And what came back was this, what I will call compromise, but I think it's actually a pretty good compromise because it's getting more revenue, and revenue that will be dedicated toward the long-term maintenance of this facility.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson, any more questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With this vote, it's important to note for everybody that there was no site selection process whatsoever in finding the right location for our public investment here. The mayor simply picked the site. With no study, analysis, or explanation, the team itself is clear about this. They were just put there. No study was ever done. And the team isn't going to get the natural benefit of our downtown tourist economy the way the Titans and the Predators and the Sounds do. Soccer could have been the key to extending the transformation of our downtown, but we're locating it in a suburban stadium 3 miles away. It's not going to have the right infrastructure or the parking for it to work very well, and nobody has really studied it sufficiently, and the state fair and the flea market and racing is going to be pushed out. Now, we're the owner, and we need this stadium to be a success. That means it needs to be in the right place. It needs to serve multiple users and multiple uses over the next 75 years. So we haven't done the crucial site analytics here, even though we've already picked firms to build it. All the normal protections that a city uses to locate something well have been avoided and pushed aside. I mean, at one point, the Fair Board even passed a blank piece of paper. Manipulation of the process has been the main City Hall work product on this. But there's a specific tragedy in giving away the 10 acres of our historic and loved fairgrounds for a private mixed-use incentive to the richest people in Nashville. Now, 1.6 million people are currently using the fairgrounds. The site has been continuously used for 100 years, and the city now is actively telling them to get lost. Somebody better should have it. The deal shouldn't be just another type of displacement. Growth and change shouldn't always just be wrapping up victims. And let's not use this historic opportunity to take a good thing, a soccer stadium, and put it in the right place. And don't do irrevocable harm to the fairgrounds. And don't let this deal split the community so. And the required gifting of the 10 acres is telling you it is in the wrong place. So no to demolish our historic fairground.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I 100% agree what Councilman Cooper said. There's no study, and it has not changed. That's why I originally voted no on resolution RS 2017-910. However, as a body, we voted yes. So that time, what it says was, yes, we did not have any site selection, but it was fairground. So as a body, we accepted that location. And as a body, we knew there was no other site selection, but we said it's okay as a body. So what we are doing is like renegotiating, Iraq nuclear deal or NAFTA. And is it good for as a government? No, I don't like it. It does not make it right the way it roll out. But unfortunately, it seems like that's what we are doing. So, at the public hearing, Mr. Ingram said trust is in short supply. Yes, I'm guilty of it because Like many people, we thought when we approved this fairground, maybe there's goodbye to flea market, goodbye to auto racing, goodbye to whatever happened. But, good people appointed with Fair Board administration and also owners team worked really, really hard. That's not the case. They put in there, they will not demolish, and they put in here, they will work with community and, enhance fairgrounds. Yes, it's going to change because this demolition portion, it's going to change the fairgrounds the way we know of today. But important thing is, unfortunately, as a body, we approved this deal. So, yes, it will stress our financial, because, we as a body, again, approved, I think in this term, as a body, we approved $895 million of capital spending in past 3 years. Previous body approved nearly 1.5 billion of capital spending. So yes, we as a body did that. We, made it, so we have to make commitment. So yes, can we sustain? And we have to. I mean, by this decision, I may lose my best friend. But I think sometimes we have to we make, our commitment, because we made commitment when we, as a body, approved past resolution. That's not, approved the way administration dealt with this business. I wish they would forthcoming, and I wish they would include us in the beginning with. I understand, we cannot do 40 members cannot negotiate always on the table, but maybe, administration can do a little better. Hey, council, we are discussing this, so we just wanted to let you know. So just, communicate with us better, and communicate with the community better. Because right now, people think if we approve this one, tomorrow they're going to demolish the building. That's not the case. So having said that, when would be the good time for me to offer the amendment?
You have 13 seconds.
Thank you. I would like to offer Amendment A and also Amendment B, if we can combine those two, Mr. Jameson.
I'll let Mr. Jameson describe those amendments.
Amendment A, initially requested by Council Lady Allen, and Amendment B are nearly identical. They have the same first sentence, but different second sentences, if I could read them both. Amendment A would provide demolition of the buildings and structures identified on the attached Exhibit A is hereby approved. Replacement buildings and structures shall be constructed prior to any demolition that would disrupt the regular operation of the Fairgrounds Nashville. Amendment B, very similarly, says demolition of the buildings and structures identified on the attached Exhibit A is hereby approved. In no event shall any such demolition that would disrupt the regular operation of the Fairgrounds Nashville occur prior to October 29, 2018.
Can you explain how do those conflict with each other? Do we need to reconcile them, or can we adopt them both?
In my opinion is that because Exhibit A, or rather Amendment A, precludes any demolition until the replacement buildings are constructed, it would be hard to imagine replacement buildings being constructed by October 29th. I think Amendment A probably captures everything you want. If there were a suspension of the rules, you could combine the amendments to say no demolition until replacement buildings, and in no event before October 29th, if you wished. But
I believe we'll need to suspend the rules regardless.
Suspend the rules to do that.
Is there an objection to the suspension of the rules? Seeing none, can you?
So if somebody is moving this, a combined amendment, it would state that demolition of the buildings and structures identified on the attached Exhibit A is hereby approved. Replacement buildings and structures shall be constructed prior to any demolition that would disrupt the regular operation of the fairgrounds, and in no event shall demolition occur prior to October 29th, 2018.
Second.
Councilmember Gilmer, I feel like I need to know what you're saying. Can you? Okay, very good. So it's been moved that we work with the combined amendment and seconded.
You're probably going to want to vote on the original substitute.
Which we have not done yet. Thank you for making that point. I have a number of, so let me back up. I have a number of people in the queue. Is that to vote on the original substitute, or shall we go ahead and vote on that and then continue to discuss as substituted? Yes. Okay. So we are voting, we are backing off of the amendments. I apologize. We are voting on the substitute, and then we will continue discussion. Unless, raise your hand if you want to speak to the substitute, if you're in the queue. To the substitute, specifically. All right, Councilmember Lee, you are speaking on the substitute to add the 3% tax. Is that correct, Councilmember Sledge?
Lee? Thank you, Madam President. Kind of, sort of, because I think it actually is a point of information because it's a question for legal.
Okay.
So, in the conversation I've been hearing, over and over I hear talk about we didn't give teachers raises and we didn't give city employees raises that we promised. And if we vote for this, then that shows that we have to tell them in the face that they didn't do that.
So, as far as the substitute goes, the substitute is on whether we graduate from $1.75. Mr. Jameson, can you explain?
That's why I said I thought it was a point of information.
Okay, so we'll get that information, Mr. Jameson.
Okay.
The current ticket tax is $1.75 for the first 5 years, then it goes up to $2.25 for years 6 and 7, and then caps out at $2.50 after year 8 and stays at $2.50. As substituted, it's essentially that same schedule, but at year 8 and 9 it goes to $2.50. Then it goes to $2.75 years 10 through 14, and then it caps out at $3 for year 15 on forward.
And so that is the substitute, and that is what we were voting on. So do you have a question on that?
I have a point of information.
Okay.
Correct?
About the substitute.
So that doesn't matter. A point of information comes, am I out of order? I thought a point of information comes first, no matter what you're talking about. Am I out of order?
I'm merely saying we will discuss the bill as substituted at length. Right now, the question that was pointed out was that we have not voted on the substitute, which is simply making that one change. And so we can do that and then come back to your question, or you can ask your question now, but I believe it has to do with the substance of the bill as a whole as opposed to just the substitute.
Okay, if you would rather come to me right after this one, I can.
You can do that.
That's fine.
Fair enough. And so we are voting on the substitute, and then we will continue to debate the bill with all questions. Is that clear? So on the substitute, which is simply the $3 as opposed to the stopping at $2.25. We're voting on the substitute. All in favor of the substitute?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you for that. Now, Councilmember Lee, back to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so my question is to legal. As we have been talking, I've been hearing a lot about if you vote on this, then you laugh in the face of not giving teachers raises and doing the 3%. And I believe there was a bill sometime back where we could have voted to assure some money to pay for those type things, and a lot of people voted that no. So my question is, very specifically, if we don't do soccer, if that passes, then will that money automatically be able to go to teacher raises and city employee raises?
Someone at the administration table will get that.
No, ma'am. The ticket tax per state law is just for construction of the stadium. So if there is no stadium, there is no ticket tax. And you could not use that for any other purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Now, we have an amendment. We have two amendments that have been combined, I believe, into one. And that is what we're voting on now, and then we'll go back to additional discussion on the bill. So we're voting on the amendment, the combined amendment. Would you describe it one more time, Mr. Jameson?
The combined amendment A and B would now read, demolition of the buildings and structures identified on the attached Exhibit A is hereby approved. Replacement buildings and structures shall be constructed prior to any demolition that would disrupt the regular operation of the Fairgrounds Nashville, and in no event would demolition occur prior to October 29th, 2018.
Okay, is it clear what we're voting on? That's the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. Now we are back on the bill as substituted, as amended. And we have many people in the queue. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam President. This is, I guess, looking at this because it involves the demolition piece, kind of thinking about this comprehensively. With all due respect to Councilman Cooper, I'm pretty deeply involved in the transformation of downtown. I think it's doing pretty well. And I would dispute the notion that the fairgrounds are any longer suburban. I grew up going to Fair Park. I worked multiple flea markets during the summer through high school and college, and I go to the state fair. Starts Friday, just about every year. And what I see with this proposal is opportunity. To acknowledge some of Councilman Cooper's concerns, there was no site selection. But I can tell you we will add to the fairgrounds a level of utilization that hasn't been seen in my lifetime while doing all the following. Adding new uses, including affordable housing, preserving and improving the speedway, recreating and improving the facilities that house the flea market, maintaining a site for the state fair as long as they want to be there, adding a remarkable amount of functional green and open space, and finally setting a new standard for how Nashville's workforce engages in a public project. And the last is maybe the most important, actually. This nearby but clearly related transaction related to this proposal, working families secured protections that we did not offer to all Metro employees this fiscal year. And frankly, it goes well beyond that in terms of childcare, affordable housing, and workplace safety. Yesterday was Labor Day, and today is a great day to celebrate Nashville's first community benefits agreement. I know that even in consideration of all the things that are possible at the fairgrounds, it won't satisfy everyone, but it satisfies me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Swope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where to begin? As we've debated this off and on now for 6 weeks, and actually for 6 months, I have purposely remained silent. This is a very, very hard decision. I have, as you all know, traveled the world and seen what soccer does to a community. In Africa, in Asia, in Europe, whether it's a rich community or a poor community, it is a uniting sport. And while I'm not a fan of soccer personally, I do understand the import that it has on an international level. To that extent, when we were awarded an MLS franchise back in November, all my international friends went, hooray! Nashville's now an international city. You're not the American it city anymore, you're the international it city. And I said, great. Let's see how this all plays out. From that moment, I will say that I think this council's been lied to. I think the community's been lied to, and whether or not it's been on purpose, that's the perceived reception that I'm getting. There have been, and I don't think it was true lies, I think it was the fact that nobody really knew what they really wanted to do in the first place, which has put this council in an incredibly bad position. We're between a rock, and a rock. And the people of this fine city that we live in are pretty much divided in half. We've all gotten the 10, 15, 20,000 emails over the past 6, 7 weeks. Don't know about y'all, but hey, I know how you feel on both sides. Honest to God, I do. We've all gotten the 2 a.m. phone calls where people call you and say, can't believe you answered the phone. And it's like, well, I'm still up reading legislation because there's hundreds of pages of this. This becomes a very passionate issue on both sides. There are pros and cons for having the stadium at the fairgrounds. I personally don't have a problem with the stadium being at the fairgrounds. In all honesty, I think it's a good idea. My problem has always been and will continue to be the 10 acres of land. That is a corporate enticement to make this deal happen. Now with that said, this is all going to come down to trust. And several weeks ago, SMI, Speedway Motorsports, reached out to me, and they have since forth met with the mayor's office several times. My biggest problem in this entire situation was if we pass this MLS deal the way it is without any other assurances of any kind, the racetrack will be gone in less than 5 years. The flea market will cease to exist within 3, and the state fair won't renew any agreements after this year. Now, that's a problem for me. It's a huge problem for me. SMI has agreed, come to the table. You've got the letters in front of you right now. Now, granted, although I hate to say this is last minute, this is last minute. They've agreed to come in, share equally in the complete rehabilitation of the Speedway. And I'm a firm believer in if you protect the elephant in the room, you protect the room. And the room to me is the three-legged stool of racing, the flea market, and the state fair. Now, I have spoken to all of your groups. I know you know I have, and I think everybody's in agreement. Now, does that mean we need to pass MLS to make this happen? I don't know. I leave that to your vote. I honest to God don't know how I'm going to vote on this right now. That is how torn I am on this. It has ripped this city in half. I'm tired of it. I think if we're all successful here, that everything can exist and it can uplift the whole community in that area. This would make one amazing facility if everybody could play nice in the sandbox. So I ask you to vote how you feel. Thank you.
Councilmember Anthony Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to rise in support, at least speak briefly on the CBA. And just will mention I don't disagree with a lot of what my colleagues said there. And I think with the amendments we made earlier, hopefully we made a nice commitment to ensuring that the flea markets obviously continue without interruption. And your term, the three-legged stool, we do continue to show the support for those. I'll briefly say we made a commitment as a city. We did vote to bring the franchise here and move forward. I think obviously we knew we'd be back here for these remaining points, the zoning especially in this demolition bill. I think Councilmember Sledge has done a great job with all these details. I think he cannot be commended enough for how hard he's worked on this. And for most of us here, the Community Benefits Agreement, the CBA, was a must. We all submitted the letter, 31 of us signed on. We wanted to make sure we got something back for the community if we were going to make this large investment. We asked Nashville Soccer Holdings to come to the table and get it done, and they have. What we have ended up with is a very good thing for the city. It's a landmark community benefits agreement. You've all seen the posters outside and all the signatures and the celebration of it, but the affordable housing that we're able to get, 20% with a significant amount of 0 to 60% AMI that we asked for, with some 3-bedroom units for families, not just a bunch of studios, which we asked for. The jobs and economic requests, we've got living wages for all the stadium employees, the concessionaires, the custodial. And not only that, here at the end, something that was absolutely vital for us, or hopefully for most of us to support, was we didn't leave the construction workers behind. We asked for higher standards, just as we did with the Do Better bill, phase 1 that we've done, and there's more to come, but we asked for the higher standards, and we have a template for going forward in the city on capital projects and investment projects. So it cannot be understated how important the CBA is and how landmark this is. Again, we've made a commitment. I think we've got something great for the community to give back. Again, it's a private deal. It's not us that's done it. It is a private agreement. Make sure I say that on the floor for the lawyers. But so again, and it was negotiated fairly, and I think everyone did a great job that worked on that. So I hope you'll support this ordinance, and we can move forward and give something back to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scott Davis.
I have the same concerns that my colleague to the left has. Do I feel we've been misled at times with this process? Yes. Am I scared that we're not going to have any money? You know, when it comes up budget time, it's right around the corner. Yes. It concerns me. Am I concerned that they're going to look at Metro General again? To cut money? Yes, that concerns me. City is torn in half. But this is my biggest concern. I'm a firm believer in what I do for one person, I do for the next person. It's what I say all the time on the zoning floor. What I do for the developer, I will do for my neighbors. I support labor, you know, clearly. I support affordable housing. But I want to ask everyone a question, especially those with the blue sticker on there. Now, I don't have a blue sticker on, but I support affordable housing and labor. And I'm pointing that out because very soon, sooner than you think, there'll be bills coming from minority communities that will have similar deals. We're not going to ask for, you know, $150 million of bonds, but we're going to ask certain boards to dedicate land to affordable housing and ask certain boards and the city to do similar projects. Now, I'm about fairness, and I don't mean to call out my colleagues, Brenda Haywood, DeCosta Hastings, Jonathan Hall, Jacoby Dow, Tanika Vercher, the illustrious Sharon Hurt, Eric Gilmore. When our communities ask for these same economics, those of you who have, if this passes tonight, that blue sticker, I am taking notes, and so are other people. If you vote against it, okay. We still love you. But those, especially with a blue sticker on, I support affordable housing and I support labor, let's do affordable housing and labor too. We're going to include that. But we are watching 3 months from now, 4 months from now. When that comes back around again, we need you with us. You know, and that's all I got to say. We got to do what's fair in all communities. So those of you with those blue stickers on tonight, we're watching. Those who vote for this, we're watching. And we expect the same kind of treatment, equal treatment, you know, in those areas that have been neglected, in those council areas that I mentioned. And I just want to thank everybody. This is a tough one. But I try my best. I'm not perfect. Treat everybody fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you. I stand in support of this, and I want to thank Councilmember Sledge for all his hard work. I think you're at about 0.5 cent now, an hour, in terms of what you've been doing. You're at about 0.5 cent. I'm excited. At first, I was not as excited. Some 10 years ago, when I came onto council, I went out to California, and we actually studied under Supervisor Ridley. They have 5 superintendents in California. And we actually studied community benefits then. We looked at it for transportation. We looked at it for communities. And I was so excited as a council member, and I came back, and I remember I tried to pass a couple of bills. And council members at that time, they laughed at me. And we could not get any traction on it. And you find out there's usually in very, very progressive cities and cities that are growing quickly like Nashville really need community benefits. So when we talk about teachers not having raises, when we talk about affordable housing, we have all these young people that are here and they're hipsters and they're graduating from college, but they cannot afford to find housing and they're living 4 or 5 to a housing. That's what spoke to me, because several people called me. They had Eddie George to call me. One time they had Jesus to call me. I said, Jesus, they're going to have to come with something more. I'm sorry, Jesus, even though I love you. But when we got this community benefits worked out, I was very excited about it because we can do things that we were able to do things as a city that we could not do if we did it as council members, because the state says that we can't do it. And it really shows a sign of a progressive and healthy city. So I feel comfortable supporting this, knowing that we will have affordable housing for our citizens or our residents, knowing that we will have child care, know that we will have living wages for people. They won't be working for $8 and $7 an hour, knowing that there will not be wage theft. One time I went and did they did a pilgrimage through the city, and we visited different construction workers, and a lot of construction workers build wonderful buildings here and their money's taken and they can never recoup that. And a lot of people don't realize in this community benefit agreement, it says that we will not do or participate in those type of habits. So no type of wage step can happen. So I'm really excited about this. I think this is a good deal. It makes me very happy. I think this is the true progress of Nashville, and to see that MLS actually participated. Now, how they got there, I'm not gonna worry about that. The point is that they're there,